Welcome back. We're on habit 4 now, which is breath body practices. And before we go there, I just want to talk a little bit about my path and why I wrote this book. I was practicing as an Ayurvedic practitioner and teaching as a yoga teacher, first in the Iyengar method and then in the Anusara method. And along the way, I found that as people were coming to me as an Ayurvedic practitioner, usually my yoga students, they were looking for some really specific information to help them with their health issues, whether it was like trouble getting pregnant, or it was chronic joint pain and inflammation, or it was irritable bowel syndrome, or it was helping manage their symptoms with fibromyalgia, or whatever. You know, the diversity of a general practitioner, a general holistic practitioner was my client base. And when I looked at what made the biggest difference for people, it was basically dialing in their habits. And yeah, with some specific information for the individual could be really helpful, but if their habits weren't dialed in, these same habits that you're now exploring and experimenting with and in refining, for many of you, you have these habits already, but you're refining them, and you're starting to find that in that refinement, you're refining who you are. You're getting more clear of how great you can feel. You're getting more insight into your subtle anatomy, and your purpose may be expanding. As you grow in energy integrity, in my experience, you start to feel a call to bigger things in your life, more growth. And that, to me, is so exciting. So if we go back then to the yogic path, the promise of the yogic path is freedom, essentially, svatantriya, to be free beyond the sense of self. And it awakens us this sense of being more than just our personality. And so much of yoga, as we bend and twist and go upside down and inside out and backwards, as we start to experiment getting around ourselves, like getting around our own limitations. And so these habits, as we start to develop these habits, they really help us to get around ourselves, to get around our own limitations, things that we thought might just have been part of, oh, well, this is just how my body works, or, oh, this is just the habits in my household, or this is what comes from my ancestry, this is just how I am. And we start to be able to see that there's just so much more that is optional in our own life. And it starts to open us to a much bigger perspective of what our life can be and how we can design our experience in our body, our experience in our household, our experience in our kitchen, our experience in our relationships, our experience in our breath body practices, which is what we're getting into today. So before we dive into that, in your book group, it's a great idea to just talk about this. You know, have people watch this video and then talk about like what is starting to shift in your awareness as you're up-leveling your habits. Are you starting to see that there's so much more that is optional, that you have a lot of choice around what your life is like and how you feel? And I'd like you to start there and have a very open-ended question, open-ended discussion, whether you do that in the group as a whole, as a big group, or whether you break into smaller groups so that everyone has a chance to actually go a little bit deeper. It's so important when we're working in a group or working with partners that we practice a deeper listening, that we listen with the desire to create a strong container for someone to actually have the experience of being able to hear themselves in their own words. It's such a amazingly subtle thing that happens, but when you listen with the intention of deep listening, of deeply knowing what the person is experiencing, there's something that shifts in you. Your care is called forward, and the person will feel that back. It'll be a very powerful experience for your group. So I invite you to do that conversation with that intention. All right, and on to breath body practices. So I love this. I've always been an athlete, so for me, the idea of not exercising is torture. But I know for many people, the idea of exercising, especially in the morning, every day, is torture. So I just want to make room for everybody in that experience. And I'm going to talk about some of my personal breakthroughs with breath body practices and why this isn't like just yoga practices, even though this is a yoga and Ayurveda centric book. What I have found over time is having diverse ways of moving in my body that are evolving with my needs, my physiological needs, but also in terms of like how old I am and what my body needs at this stage in life, but also with just my greater, more general needs with like, am I working more of a desk job this month, or am I traveling on airplanes a lot, or am I spending a lot of time with my kid and able to, do different things throughout the day that are more active. So letting yourself presence, what are the practices for you right now? And just to, have a conversation in your group about that. Like, hey, how are your workouts, or whatever you want to call them, how are they serving you? And what's what's outdated? Like, how do you want to feel next? And then starting to see like, okay, from that, what changes do you want to make now? So for me, one of the things I realized, and it was a few years ago, I was doing a lot of yoga, and I wasn't doing as much cardio or weight stuff. I was doing a lot of weight bearing within yoga. And I started to just add a lot of just tactical body weight movement, TBT. I added a little bit of CrossFit. I added some functional movement, which is like where you get pretty primal movement. You can Google it if you don't know what those things were. I started to really diversify and bring my yoga into that, and came up with a much more creative practice. It did help me drop a little weight I had been putting on, and build some strength. But what really shifted is just the way I feel. And it opened up an exploration for me of like, what's right for me right now. So you'll see in this chapter, you've got your hardening practices, your cardio, your softening practices. It's a really good idea to look at like, hey, are you someone who always skips the hardening? There's also the easy practices, the moderate, and the difficult or hard practices. And are you someone who always skips really challenging workouts? Or are you someone on the opposite side of the spectrum who doesn't give yourself a break? I can easily fall in that, where I push a little hard, and then I get really tight, and then I might get injured. I might develop chronic inflammation in a joint. So it's a great exploration to say like, hey, right now, where's the field of experimentation? For you and your book groups to do that, have a conversation about it, maybe do a reflection exercise. You can also use your time in your book group to pull out your workbook and to actually fill out the same worksheet together. That can be a great way to have everyone just work on the same thing at the same time, and then bring that back for the next week. So again, I'm not going to give you structure in this. I'm just hope to give you some ideas of what I found to be useful in coaching my groups.